Hey, everybody. Today I talked to my friend Halisi Tambuzi, and we talk in depth about the employee handbook. This is the perfect episode if you haven't thought about yours in a while, or if you're newer to HR and you're like, yeah, what about it? It just says a little bit about our culture. No, it protects you in case there needs to be an employee workplace investigation. He talks about a couple policies that you must include for it to be a good handbook that's usable for both you and the employees. And he also explains that he himself does audits. If you have an existing employee handbook, he can help you figure out where your gaps are and make sure you're protected legally, but also that it's something that the employees are using as a tool to stop interrupting you so much. So enjoy the episode, and here we go. Hey, Halisi, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I am excited to talk to you about something that might seem like a nice to have, but you're like a deep expert in making sure employee handbooks don't suck. Among many other things, when I found you online and we started chit chatting, you were talking about something that I think gets forgotten a lot, and employees need this in order to thrive and survive at their organizations. So let's just kick it off by talking about your company. Is it Workforce Investigators?
Workplace investigators.
So close, but I love the name and the sentiment. Tell us a little bit about your company and what you do, and then I have so many questions about what makes a great handbook.
Yeah, workplace investigators. So we're a company that provides HR audits. We help with HR organization, and then we also help with investigations. So if you're uncomfortable conducting an investigation, or even if there is some type of conflict of interest and you don't want to be the person over the investigation because there's a conflict, then you may need a third party investigator. And so that's when you can call me in.
Okay, so what kinds of examples, without naming companies or literal situations, because you probably can't, what are some examples of what someone would reach out for you for in those scenarios?
Yeah, so someone might reach out to me if they've just never conducted an investigation. So they have employees who have a concern. They've gone to a manager. The manager doesn't necessarily know how to resolve it. It could involve multiple other employees in the company, and so they need some assistance with how to just walk through it. That's really just the basic. Okay, how do I collect the information?
That's an investigation is something that can grind an HR leader's day to a complete halt, if not their week or their entire month. And they're all very busy as it is. Like one of the most busiest leaders that no one knows or appreciates is the HR whack-a-mole that the HR leader does every day of answering everyone's questions and making sure everything happens in the back office to keep the company running. So it sounds like a super wise investment in your sanity to find an expert like you, work with someone like you to do this well and do it efficiently and do it probably a little bit legally.
The legal compliant is certainly necessary. I mean, there's things you want to protect privacy at the same time, just the confidential information. You want to be able to ask witnesses, people who have seen or people who've been able to connect with the particular issue. What have they seen? And you want to be able to identify those questions. So sometimes those questions to ask witnesses can be difficult arranging what makes sense because you also want to try to get the truth out of them. And so if the questions aren't arranged accurately, you may not get the outcome that you want. You may not get the answers that lead you to actually what occurred.
How did you get so involved with this? Where did this all begin?
This began because I've been customizing handbooks for the last 8.5 years, with all 50 states had to understand how the federal laws and the regulations worked. In addition to that, we would also answer HR questions. Companies would reach out to us and ask us HR questions. What I started to identify was they're calling for one reason, and one reason might be I need to separate from an employee. What do I need to do? So they would call for that particular purpose. But in that conversation, the questions that I'm posing, is someone part of a protected category or protected activity? Is it linked to this reason of why you want to separate from this employee? And so in asking those questions, it ultimately revealed that there were other issues that they hadn't known about, hadn't dealt with. Moving over to this workplace investigators, I thought it would be helpful for employers just to have a picture of what employment laws do I need to abide by.
So, really, the employee handbook is a means to make sure that you are prepared to have investigations that go well. And in It's almost like if someone's reaching out to you for help with an investigation, that raises another question is what's in your employee handbook and what might be missing for any of this to even be an issue? There's nothing wrong with anyone. If you need to ask out, reach out for help, you're doing the best that you can. But Halisi, do you think it's an indicator that something in the employee handbook might not be addressed or something might be missing if an investigation's even kicking off where someone needs help?
In any type of employment, like if it reaches some type of lawsuit, right? The first place that someone's going to look, some plaintiff's attorney is going to look, is the handbook. The what policies you have. The second piece to that is, are you consistent with the policy that you have? And the policy that you have needs to make sure that it aligns with the state and federal laws. So, do you have a policy? Does it align with state and federal law? And then, are you doing it consistently?
Okay, so in my experience, I've seen two types of employee handbooks, and I'm curious what you think about this.
Mhm.
I've seen the fun, whimsical one that's like, these are our values and this is our culture and this is how much PTO you get. And it's very well designed, it's very engaging looking, but it's kind of fluffy. And I've seen other employee handbooks that are like, boom, like here's the manuscript of all the rules of the company, and you're never going to read it because it's boring and it's not written in a way that anyone can digest. Is there a happy middle ground where it's comprehensive and engaging?
There is a happy middle ground. It shouldn't just be complicated legal language. Even though like that's the law, that's not how people are going to read it. You want your employees to be able to read it because it's setting the standard of the policy. And you also want your employees to be able to, before they even come to you with questions, to be able to say, "Hey, have you taken a look at the handbook?" So that they can answer some of the questions that they may have or didn't even know they have.
And I think when employees come to HR leaders and say, or ask a question, and the answer is, did you check the handbook? That's also an indicator that something's not right with onboarding. If employees aren't equipped after they're onboarded to know how to use this as a tool for them too, then we need to do a better job of training employees how to use it and how to access it in a way that they don't have to bug me because employees hate bugging the HR leader. It's embarrassing. We know they're busy. So I guess I just answered my own question and I'm hoping you agree with me like a good echo chamber would. Do you think that it's really important to make sure employees get this during onboarding?
I think that first day of hiring needs to really be focused on giving the employee the handbook and allowing them to review it. As far as that initial day, I think that that is a really important first day. It's an easy, light going day. They're just getting introduced to everyone. By trying to throw the person into the mix too soon, they're not going to get an opportunity to understand the systems. Reading the handbook is a good, nice first day. Getting all the paperwork organized is a good, gentle day in getting them just introduced to everyone.
Yeah, and you just made me think too, there's probably a way to gamify it and say, what's your favorite of our benefits out of it, like whether it's the snack box or there's probably things that you might offer that are unique or maybe different, or it's a way to test them while getting them to read it, while getting them to have a discussion with each other if there's more than one person onboarding. And then you get to hear what people think is the most impactful value add to what the company offers. You could make like a scavenger hunt like, what's your favorite thing that we offer? Or like, what do you wish we offered that we don't? Or what of our company values is your favorite and why? And do you have a personal story about why this resonates with you? That could be a way to get people to read it without realizing what you're actually doing.
I've never thought of that, but that's actually like a good and that's a nice first day.
Yeah, it's
So
fun.
it's a fun first day. "Hey, how was your first day at work?" "Well, I read the handbook, did all that, but we got to engage and communicate about what was missing, what we felt was missing, what policies were good." So yeah, I think gamifying maybe that first day can be helpful.
Yeah, totally. Employees hate being bored and they're not listening to really important information. That makes the HR person nuts later when they're like, I have a question. And you're like, we talked about this, but they didn't catch it because it was boring. So, Halisi, can you tell us like what are the top and most important policies that you think every employee handbook needs to have included in it?
Great question. So, as far as handbooks and what the primary pieces that need to go into a handbook, and when I'm saying primary, I'm talking about the things that you would not even hand out if these pieces really aren't in the handbook. So, for one, an at will statement. The at will statement is informing the employees that the employment relationship is at will. The employee can take off for any reason. The employer can separate for any legal reason. So having that at will statement in there. If that statement is not in there, what happens with the handbook is that handbook is distributed for everybody. And so it can appear as if there is a contract extended to everyone. And so that becomes very risky because it makes it very difficult to move through a separation, to offboard people. Having that at will statement placed inside the handbook is primary.
And maybe if I could just add to that, adding telling employees this actually benefits you, it like lets you leave. Well, maybe it does. Anyone knows they can just like leave an organization, but sometimes explaining the why and like this is a partnership. We're not a family. I hate when companies call themselves a family. Like this is the maybe boring jargon we got to go through, but making sure employees know what at will means. I know friends and I've even been fired and been told like it's an at will company, and it's like what? Like you're just reeling from being let go, but, like, not even knowing what that means. So, like, you're helping employees know how business works when you explain to them, like, what it is.
I really want employees overall, as an idealistic aspect, I want them to increase the business acumen. And I think that that would provide such a great balance for the employer as well as for the employee. They would make themselves more marketable to simply say, "Hey, I understand the cost that my employer provides, that they have to take on risks, that they have to put out the product, and therefore, obviously, I can't maximize my wage that I actually want for myself, but I can understand that where they're coming from." And in turn, the employer says, "Hey, I understand that I have these large overhead costs, but I do want my employees to stay with me. I do want them to provide value to the system that we have in here, and therefore they provide more benefits."
Totally. So the at will is one of the critical things to have in there. What else?
An employee concern reporting policy is going to be important. A space for employees to know this is the document that would be used to inform HR of any concerns that I have.
Chef's kiss. Yeah, we don't always know where to go for that, and then we talk to each other and make everybody upset on accident.
Can make a lot of people upset. You can start the gossip pieces that can come into play because people just are uncomfortable about situations, circumstances that have taken place within the workplace. So making sure that they know that there's a form to fill out, that they know who to submit the form to, and that there is a second person. So say if your concern is with the HR person who would normally receive the form, you need to have a second person that you're able to go to. And so employees need to know who that is.
Can I ask your opinion? Just side note, what happens when HR has an issue with their HR leader? How meta is that?
It's frustrating, but if HR has an issue with their HR leader, then the HR direct employee needs to be able to go to another leader within the company.
So that's why that exists. Yeah.
That's exactly why that exists.
And what was that called? What was that policy called? We've got the at will, and then what did you just describe?
I call it employee concern reporting policy.
Okay. What else?
Leave of absence needs to be there. As far as your inability to work because you have a disability, and by disability, I mean you're not able to engage in the normal life functions as you previously were. And so having a leave of absence policy that employees can go to and say, "Hey, I need to communicate this to you. I having difficulty sitting, so I need some home rest. I need to rest at home for a little bit." And so the employee should be able to go to leave of absence policy to see what that is, and then feel comfortable being able to talk to whatever leader or HR is there.
I love your like little roll call here, and I hope it's helpful for the listeners to hear my perspective as the employee in how I've seen this go well or not. There's been times twice in my career I can remember, maybe three times, where I've had to use this leave of absence like concept policy, and they were big, awful, defining life moments for me. And I went to my HR leader, and the first time it was, "Hey, I'm getting divorced. I haven't slept in a week. I need to get some affairs in order, and like I can't work right now." And the other one was when my brother passed away. And in those moments, you can't think clear. So when an HR leader can hold space for you for a second and say, "I'm so sorry to hear that. We have a leave of absence policy for just this." Like we need really literal instructions because your life almost feels like a movie in a really bad way when those days happen. And I was lucky to have some HR leaders really show up for me as a human and not just say, "Okay, well, here's the process." I needed someone to say, I know you're not okay. It's okay to not be okay. We're here for you. We support you. That made me love and feel engaged at the company so much more when I came back because they had space for me to fall apart for a second. And that person just like gave me a little bit of indication that they saw me as a real person. And I needed it. So it's okay to like break that fourth wall and be like, I'm sorry to hear that, you know?
Leave policies are very underrated, or when you're going to companies, understanding what their leave policy is, because those are the moments, just like you said, a personal moment, you needed someone to see you. Those are really important moments that are going to make employees feel like they are needed or respected. I remember when I had my wife and I had our daughter, I was able to bring my child to work. And the idea about bringing a child to work is obviously understand that a newborn is going to hinder your work progress. So my employer recognized that. They understand they wouldn't have that policy if they didn't recognize that a newborn child next to you is going to slow you down a little bit. And so their focus was not to make sure that I am producing at 100%. It was more so produce what you can. This is a defining moment in your life. And that makes me respect them so much more, so that when I'm done with my leave or done bringing my daughter to work for the first few months, I want to, when I return, I want to provide them with all of my resources.
It's like when an employer sees you through a crisis, which I would call having a newborn a little bit of a crisis. It's like you're not meeting barely your basic needs. You're very tired. It's not a bad crisis. It's just things in your life are completely thrown out of whack right now. So when you can show up for an employee and do right by them in any moment of crisis or great change, you will do so much to drive engagement when they come back and they are like, the company actually cared about them as a person, which is that's the reason we're all losing our minds, is because we feel like these companies don't care about us. That's going to be one of the social clips there, is you leading into this. That's really what all these discussions are about. Or people are like, I'm a person, I'm not a number, I'm not someone you can just lay off because people didn't balance the spreadsheets. So it is so above and beyond to do the basic thing of just doing right by your people when they're having their bad days, or like yours wasn't a bad day, but traumatic to your routine.
Your whole equilibrium is all thrown off, like
Yeah.
just trying to get things on the schedule is thrown off. So I do think it's a change. It's a change in your everyday routine. You have to come up with new routines to try to facilitate going to work and having a child. So it's a complete chaos in the mind, even though it's a good event.
Yes, 100%. And to heal anyone who's ever struggled with having a newborn and trying to balance work, man or woman, the way we work is this modern way of living is very busted. We're meant to be in large groups of people having tons of support. So if you've ever struggled to get it all done, we were not meant to live this way. And it's really bogus. It's like that's my peek behind the curtain of the matrix, like just so everyone knows. So we've got the at will, we've got employee concern reporting, leave of absence. What else you got?
You want to have your meal breaks in there. The meal breaks are an important area, but I would guess a little bit more important than meal breaks is your time off policies, holidays, vacation, what benefits. I think a good benefit that is underutilized is a gym membership where the company is willing to reimburse you for your fitness. I don't see them too often, but when I do see them, I really like them.
People like to shame those on LinkedIn and say, that's not what employees want. And I'm always like, that's always what I wanted and appreciated and used. And I loved it. I think to do that well, let me know if you agree or disagree. There needs to be something in the culture that allows people to use it sometimes even during the day. Like after a full work day, you can't always get to the gym. I always thrived in workplaces that were flexible and I could block off time because I was always kind of working. In tech, maybe this is more realistic, but it's like, hey, on Wednesdays and Fridays, I'm off from like 12 to 2 and people just know that about me. And I was at smaller companies, so you could schedule around it. But I would think through problems for work at the gym. So it's not like, oh, these employees are spoiled, they need fancy gym memberships. I am using that time to move my body and stay healthy. And of course I'm thinking about work because I care about my job and I care about doing a good job. So at the end of the day with kids, I don't always have time to go to the gym. So figuring out your flexibility of the work-life balance concept. Companies have too many meetings, and there is plenty of time in a day for an employee to go for a walk, go to the gym, and come back. And it's better for them. It's healthier for them, and they're more productive and collaborative when they get back for the company.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to depend on the industry. Yeah, the industry that you're in is going to dictate whether you get some open flexibility time. But a restaurant, you may not be able to take off, but there's kind of the shorter hours with restaurants and whatnot. But I do think businesses recognizing that staying healthy, you're going to be more focused, coming into work, more energized, just healthy levels. Last policy is going to be an anti-harassment policy.
Oh my God.
It's a standard policy. You're going to see them in most handbooks. They're going to be there. If it's not there, it's a huge problem.
I can't believe I even for when that's why I had that reaction when you said it because I'm like, oh, there's been many moments in my career where I'm like, that was inappropriate, either for me or on behalf of someone else. So yeah, that's pretty critical, which ladders back up to your employee concern reporting.
Let me tell you how that looks, right? So to not have it in there, to not have an anti-harassment policy in there. Say, for example, an employee files a claim against a business. One of the first things is saying, hey, look at the handbook. What's in the handbook? And then the handbook, you open the handbook and there's nothing in there. And the kind of the question to the employer is, you don't even prevent it. You don't even tell people not to engage in the type of behavior, let alone them engaging in the behavior. You hadn't even told them up front that's not good behavior. And so it looks really bad. But this is in part why the anti-harassment policies are standard within a handbook. You're often going to see them there.
Well, and what you're saying too, like that's why it's good to have an audit from an expert like you to make sure that everything is included. Stuff that you might think is in there, but it's not worded correctly, or it's not in there and you thought it was. You never know. Some people might be listening to this like, these are no brainers, but I know a lot of people are like, I need to go check my employee handbook right now. So, with so much expected of an HR leader in a given day, they own so many parts of the business. It's really wise to invest in the peace of mind, maybe to make sure that everything's in there. So that's another thing that you offer to do, right? You'll do an audit and tell someone where they stand and how they can do better.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that the audit process is you may identify that, hey, there's an issue here, but the audit process is going to reveal other issues. And the good thing about the audit process is you can take the time to say, look, we understand what we're missing. And now we have goals that we can set over the next 6 months to get things in order. And so the audit will lay that out.
I love that. And I'm curious, what's your advice to someone who's thinking right now, man, I have so many other competing priorities. We have performance reviews, we open enrollment just ended and everyone's freaking out because some people didn't sign up. I've got all these things to do. What's your advice to someone who's like, I don't have time for this right now. I'll do it later.
The risk of doing it later where someone could make a complaint, that's ultimately going to be kind of the risk. I would say doing an audit is a way to get some stuff off of your plate so you're not having to go through and find each piece that's missing. Someone coming in like myself, another HR professional coming in and informing you about which areas are off, whether it's misclassification issues, whether it's a handbook policy, that is going to relieve much more stress because at least you'll have a report of what needs to get done versus speculating in your own mind about what you have or don't have.
Yeah. And it's almost like you can have a roadmap. You can get the feedback and then plan for it. And you're not just like, oh, I need to get to that. And I don't even know what's wrong. Oh, I need to get to that. Oh, that's too much of a mental load to at least have an audit and have direct next steps for improvement and set goal milestones, make sure it actually happens. Halisi, if someone is thinking really seriously about doing an audit or just wanting more information on where they currently stand with theirs, ballpark, how much does it cost to do something like this well in working with someone like you?
Yeah, ballpark just starting off, it can start around $2,000 to do the audit. Now that is going to change depending on your employee count, depending on how you're trying to grow. Have some clients who doing franchises that can kind of change the structure. Another piece that could also change the structure is multiple locations. Multiple locations ultimately can mean that you have records in various places, obviously, but the idea there is that you have to do a kind of a different analysis to determine whether or not the business is counting their employees properly. So someone might try to say, hey, I need you to work 30 hours here and 20 hours in another place. And then the overtime issue is in question. So there are different analyses that can increase the cost. But I think from a starting point, that $2,000 is a good range.
And, to all my listeners, that's why we built Engagement Academy, because you need budget to make investments. You are the ultimate revenue lever at your company, even though you've been gaslit into thinking you don't drive money for the business and you're some kind of necessary evil. You need budget so that you can hire experts like Halisi, or there's lots of different types of fractional people you can work with to help you go faster, because you can't be an expert in everything. So in the Engagement Academy community, we have a script you can use to ask for budget in a way that a CEO is more likely to hear you, because you're talking about how it benefits the business and how it's going to impact future revenue and growth, which is what they care about. That way you're not going to them like, I don't even have a budget and I need this thing that's expensive, but it's not expensive because it's an investment in your sanity and also keeping the business on track to have a long-term scalable future. So if anything you just heard me say, just know that you deserve to have a budget, if not one of the healthiest budget. And it's not for parties and snack boxes, it's for investments in the business. And they're hefty, but they're worth making to protect the business and do right by employees. And like I said, save your sanity. You can't do it all. You need to work with super smart people like Halisi to help you go faster. End rant. There was no question there, Halisi.
Audits are worthy investments because it's going to allow you to be very clear on what you need to do, and it decreases risk within the company. And so you may look at the price and say, hey, that's a big tag. But the other side of it is the risk for not putting these pieces in place, right? You don't want employees to raise complaints. You don't want to have to defend yourself in some type of lawsuit. That's not fun for anyone. It's time consuming. It costs, even if you're right, it still costs.
Yeah. Oh,
It costs to even prove that you are in the right. So you don't want to do that. And so having an audit, just to be clear on how you've been doing things and what do we need to do moving forward, is going to be hugely beneficial.
it costs. Even when you're right, it costs. That was a badass thing to say, Halisi. Okay, well, Halisi, you have so much to offer in terms of your like very deep legal knowledge. So we've in getting this right and why it's so important. So to everyone listening, Halisi is coming in the Engagement Academy community. He will be in there for you to reach there or talk to there. But also, Halisi, we'll put ways for people to contact you in the show notes. But for right now, can you tell us the best way for people to find and connect with you?
Best way to connect with me is going to be on LinkedIn. And Halisi is spelled Halisi, and my last name is Tambuzi, Tambuzi. You can also go to my website. It's wpihr.com.
Amazing. Halisi, thanks for coming on the show and for sharing so much of your knowledge with us. And we're going to have you come back because I have so many more questions. So I look forward to having you on again.
Thank you for having me, Christy.